Star Trek, Primitive Passenger, Season 6, Episode 8, The Invitation. The twin sons of morning cast long shadows across the lush green fields as Nolan Mercer emerged from a cluster of buildings, wiping the sweat from his brow. Behind him, the sounds of laughter and chatter from a group of Neos faded into the background. Ilara fell into step beside him, her skin glistening in the fading golden light. "Quite the workout," Nolan remarked, his breathing still slightly labored. "Plasma ball is definitely a game for the young." Ilara's smile lit up. "You held your own, though I think Julie might have been going easy on you. I would be angry, but right now I'm too exhausted to feel bad about it." He shook his head. As they walked across the courtyard, Nolan found himself lost in Ilara's frame for a moment as he let her get a few steps ahead of him. Combined with her scent, after such a raucous workout, it pulled on something deep within him, an unfamiliar mix of longing and fear. As much as he tried to push it away, the realization burned, undeniable and unyielding, that he could no longer see her as anything but the woman next to him. He quickened his pace and took her hand as they walked. Nolan's comm badge, affixed to his casual attire inside of his bag, began to vibrate and pulse with a soft blue light. "It's Admiral Janeway," Ilara stated as though clairvoyant, always connected to ship systems. Nolan's eyebrows rose in surprise. "What do you think is on the Admiral's mind? Maybe she ran out of coffee." Nolan and Ilara both smiled, though not quite at each other. They stepped into their cottage on the courtyard. Ilara tapped the comm on the wall. A holographic Janeway flickered to life. Her expression was a careful blend of warmth and professionalism. "Nolan," she began, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of her mouth, "I hope this message finds you well. As we've discussed, I've been working on making some arrangements for you. I think I've been able to put things together in a manner you'll appreciate." Nolan glanced over at Ilara as she stepped into the shower. Janeway continued, her voice carrying the weight of carefully chosen words. "The Federation Council has approved a visit to Earth for you. We've set aside coordinates for your arrival in space near Earth Station. I'm transmitting them along with this message." She paused, her eyes seeming to meet Nolan's through the recording. "I know trust doesn't come easily, especially given our history, but I hope you'll see this as a step toward reconciliation. When you arrive, check in with Earth Station for credentials. They'll give you full access to our planetary transportation systems." As the message concluded, Nolan stepped into the shower as Ilara stepped out. "So, what do we make of that?" Ilara pulled on clothes, her hair wrapped in a towel. "Janeway has been mostly up front with you thus far. It could be a genuine olive branch. Or a trap," Nolan finished, scrubbing his hair as the steam swirled around him. "I'm sure Janeway's efforts are genuine, but once on planet, she's no longer the only one involved." On the bridge of the great dreadship, Nolan clicked through various screens with his holographic console. "I like your approach to this, Ilara. Set a course for the edge of the Sol system, just within long-range sensors. We'll take a look before committing to anything." The perfect black hull of the Havoc blinked into existence at the fringes of Earth's solar system, a testament to the power of its blink drive technology. Nolan stood at the main view screen, his eyes scanning the readouts scrolling across its surface. Ilara's fingers danced over the controls, her synthetic synapses processing vast amounts of data in milliseconds. "I'm not detecting any unusual activity," she reported. "The coordinates check out. There's a large open area around the designated coordinates area for your arrival, clear of other traffic." Nolan nodded, his face a map of deep thoughts. "All right, I'll take the Lost in. You head back to Empire North. Keep an eye on things from there." "Are you sure you don't want me to come with you?" Ilara asked, a note of concern in her voice. Nolan's expression softened for a moment. "I'd like that, but I think this is something I need to do alone. A lot of history. Besides, I need you to be my eyes and ears out here." The truth, maybe more of a feeling than an idea, was that Nolan couldn't bear the thought of Ilara being taken by Section 31, and he had no idea who he could trust once on the surface. As Nolan prepared to board the Lost, Alara caught his arm. "Be careful," she said softly. "And Nolan, remember, no matter what you find down there, you have a home here." Nolan let his gratitude envelop her, holding her close for just a moment. He tapped his comm badge and beamed to the Lost. The smaller ship blinked outside of the Havoc, its sleek form flashing into existence, began gliding toward the coordinates provided by Janeway. As it approached Earth orbit, Nolan felt a tightness in his chest, more of anticipation and anxiety than relief of happiness. The Lost parked in the designated area, the blue-green orb of Earth filling the view screen. Nolan's breath caught in his throat at the sight of his home planet, so familiar yet so alien after centuries away. A chirp from the console broke his reverie. An automated message from Earth Station. "Welcome to Earth Station. Please input your personal identification code and submit your vessel's entrance confirmation," a crisp voice declared. Nolan pulled up the details Janeway had sent him and transmitted them to the station. "Thank you. Please state your name and purpose of your visit," the automated voice continued. Nolan cleared his throat, suddenly aware of the weight of the moment. "This is Nolan Mercer, aboard the Lost. I'm here at the invitation of Admiral Janeway." There was a pause, then, "Confirmed, Mr. Mercer. Please proceed to Docking Bay 17 for processing." As the Lost glided toward Earth Station, Nolan couldn't shake the feeling that he was swimming into the mouth of a shark. Earth had once been his home, but now felt as alien as any distant planet he'd encountered in his long journey across the stars. The docking procedure was smooth and efficient. As he beamed off the Lost and into the sterile corridors of Earth Station, he was struck by the sleek, almost organic design of the architecture. Following illuminated signs, Nolan made his way to the processing area. The room was filled with beings from across the Federation, humans mingling with alien species he could barely comprehend. He joined the short queue, acutely aware of the curious glances thrown his way. "Next," called a bored-looking Trill official. Nolan stepped forward, feeling oddly nervous. "Name?" the official droned, not looking up from her console. "Nolan Mercer." At this, the Trill's head snapped up, her eyes widening slightly. Yes, Mr. Mercer, of course. We've been expecting you. Please place your hand on the scanner." Nolan complied, watching as a blue light passed over his palm. The official then produced a small device, pricking Nolan's finger with barely a warning. "Genetic verification," she explained curtly. After a moment, the console beeped affirmatively. The young Trill officer handed Nolan a small packet. "Your temporary credentials, Mr. Mercer. This will grant you access to planetary transportation and basic amenities. Keep it with you at all times. Enjoy your stay." With that, Nolan was dismissed. He stood for a moment, partially pulling the credentials out of the envelope. It felt surreal. After centuries of dreaming about this moment, it was just bureaucracy and paperwork. He was finally cleared to return to Earth. As he made his way to the transporter room, Nolan's mind raced with possibilities. Where would he go first? What would he find? And most importantly, was Earth still home? The transporter technician looked at him expectantly. "Destination, sir?" Nolan hesitated for just a moment before answering. "San Francisco." As the transporter beam enveloped him, Nolan Mercer prepared to set foot on Earth for the second time in over 400 years. The adventure he had longed for, and perhaps feared, was about to begin. The familiar tingle of the transporter faded, and Nolan found himself standing in the heart of San Francisco. A city Nolan hadn't seen since his mid-30s had obviously changed dramatically since he was alive. The city most famous for homelessness, drug addiction, and poop maps in his day was now sparkling clean with sleek, towering structures of glass and some material he couldn't identify that stretched towards the sky, their surfaces shimmering in the sun. Nolan took a deep breath, expecting the scent of the bay or perhaps the hint of cuisine from nearby restaurants. Instead, the air was crisp and sterile, filtered to perfection. He shook his head, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "Welcome to the future, Johnny," he muttered to himself. As he began to walk, Nolan noticed the smooth, almost silent movement of people around him. Citizens glided by on personal transports or walked with a purpose, their eyes often fixed on invisible displays projected by their ocular implants. Few seemed to notice the newcomer in their midst. Determined to engage with this new world, Nolan approached a young woman waiting at what appeared to be a public transport station. "Excuse me," he began, offering a friendly smile. "I'm new in town. Could you recommend a good place to grab a bite?" The woman's eyes flickered to him briefly, a look of mild surprise crossing her face at being addressed directly. There's a replicator station just down the block," she replied, gesturing vaguely before returning her attention to whatever she was viewing through her implants. Nolan's smile faltered slightly. "Thanks, I appreciate it," he said, as she seemed to forget he was there. As he walked, he couldn't shake the feeling of being a ghost in a world that had long since moved on without him. He found the replicator station easily enough, a sleek kiosk humming with energy. After a moment of hesitation, he ordered a classic cheeseburger, hoping for a taste of familiarity. The burger materialized instantly, looking perfect. Too perfect. As he bit into it, Nolan found the taste oddly flat, lacking the imperfections that had once made food interesting. As he finished his meal, a melodic chime sounded nearby. A public announcement system activated, its voice soothing and artificial. "Attention citizens. The combined lecture on interspecies ethics will begin in 30 minutes at the Admiral Archer Memorial Academy Auditorium. All are welcome to attend." Nolan's interest piqued. Perhaps this would be an opportunity to gain some insight into the current state of Federation philosophy. He made his way to the academy, joining a small crowd filing into the auditorium. As he settled into a seat, a striking Asian woman sat down next to him. She offered a warm smile, a stark contrast to the indifference he'd encountered so far. "First time at one of these lectures?" she asked, her voice carrying a hint of genuine curiosity. Nolan nodded, grateful for the interaction. "That obvious, huh?" She laughed softly. "You have that taking-it-all-in look. I'm Malin, by the way." "Nolan," he replied, shaking her hand. "It's been a while since I've been to anything like this." As the lecture began, Nolan found himself dividing his attention between the speaker's words on ethical considerations in a multi-species society and stolen glances at Malin. There was something refreshingly present about her, a quality that seemed rare in this era. After the lecture, Malin turned to him. "So, what did you think? Pretty heavy stuff, right?" Nolan, caught slightly off guard by her continued interest, nodded. "It's fascinating how much has changed, yet some fundamental questions remain the same." Malin's eyes lit up. "Exactly. Say, would you like to grab a coffee? There's a great little place nearby that still serves the real thing, not just replicated." For a moment, Nolan hesitated. Part of him screamed caution. This could be a setup, a plant by Starfleet or worse. But the larger part, the part that had yearned for genuine human connection for centuries, won out. "I'd like that," he said with a smile. As they left the auditorium, Nolan couldn't shake the feeling that his visit to Earth was about to take an unexpected turn. Whether for better or worse remained to be seen. Meanwhile, on Earth Station, a nondescript ship approached the Lost. Inside, a team of Section 31 operatives huddled around a console, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of holographic displays. "All right, people," the lead operative said, her voice low and focused. "We've got one shot at this. Let's make it count." As night fell over San Francisco, Nolan found himself in a state of conflicted emotions. His evening with Malin had been a welcome respite from the alienation he'd felt since arriving on Earth. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her than met the eye. "I should probably call it a night," Nolan said reluctantly. "It's been quite a day." Malin nodded, a hint of disappointment in her eyes. "Of course, but let's meet again tomorrow, okay? There's an exhibition on 22nd century art that I bet you'd find fascinating." "I completely missed the 22nd century," Nolan stated flatly. His curiosity piqued despite his reservations, and he agreed to meet her the next day. They parted ways, Malin disappearing into a nearby transport hub while Nolan opted to walk back to his assigned quarters. As he navigated the eerily quiet streets, illuminated by the soft glow of ambient lighting, Nolan's stomach groaned. The replicated food was lacking, for loss of a better word, and he was in need of something to eat. He tapped at the pad that came with his temporary ID and found some nearby restaurants that were still open, arriving at a side street with a big glowing sign that simply said, "Late Night." Several restaurants and stalls lined the wide pedestrian corridor. Nolan didn't recognize most of the foods, but he could smell meat cooking, so he followed his nose. Approaching one of the street-side stalls, he saw hanging roast duck, bullfrog legs on a rice pilaf, and kebabs with a cartoon of a sheep above them. "Any chance I can get a quick sample of the lamb?" he asked the woman behind the counter. Her thick dark hair and prominent nose gave her the look of a television gypsy, fashioned after the Romani people of his time. She glanced at his ID card, scanned it with a portable scanner, and plucked a cube of lamb from the grill. Nolan dropped the whole thing into his mouth and began chewing slowly, with his cheeks bulging and his jaw working as his mouth opened and closed, struggling to contain the oversized morsel. It was juicy and flavorful, and the delicious animal fats made Nolan's eyes roll back in his head. "Real lamb," he said. A trickle of juice ran from the corner of his mouth. He dabbed his mouth with a napkin, a bit embarrassed. "This is great. I'll have one of those big kebabs, please." The woman glared at him as though she'd just witnessed a mountain lion devour Bambi, scanned his ID again, and handed him a large, heavy kebab. "No thank you, no fuck you, just a cold, blank stare." As Nolan walked back to his designated hotel, the one he was allowed to stay at during his visit, he remembered visiting communist China in the 1980s and being restricted to specific hotels, usually well outfitted with bugs and cameras to keep an eye on foreigners. He tapped his comm badge. "Elara, you there?" "Always," came the immediate reply. "How's Earth treating you?" Nolan stopped for a second. "Always" seemed stuck in his head. Swallowing a big mouthful of fire-roasted onions and peppers. "It's not what I expected. Everything's so sterile, so perfect. It's like the soul of the place has been sanitized right out of it. And the woman from the lecture?" Elara prompted, a note of concern in her voice. "Malin." Nolan paused, considering. "She's different. Engaging. Present in a way others aren't. But that only means that you're not sure if you can trust her," Elara finished. "Yeah, I wouldn't have trusted a woman randomly deciding to be my BFF when I was alive," he said with a hint of sadness. "Stay frosty." Elara stealing one of Nolan's typical phrases. Nolan arrived at his quarters, a sleek apartment with a view of the bay. "Elara, any news on your end?" Ilara's tone shifted, becoming more businesslike. "Actually, yes. Someone's been trying to access the Lost. A team is working to bypass security and beam aboard. To be expected." Nolan pulled the final cube of meat from the long skewer, biting it in half. "Section 31. Most likely," Elara confirmed. "They've conducted scans and accessed multiple consoles remotely. But don't worry, they haven't gotten anything of real value. I fed them just enough to keep them busy without revealing anything crucial." Nolan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Thank you. Keep an eye on it. I'm sure they won't stop until they get what they want." The next morning, Nolan decided to try and make contact with some of the scientists and academics he'd hoped to meet with on his trip. He used his temporary credentials to access a public communication terminal, sending out messages to various institutions and individuals. Hours passed, and the responses, when they came, were uniformly polite and evasive. "I'm sorry, but my schedule is full. Perhaps another time. I'm not at liberty to discuss my work with outside parties." Frustration mounting, Nolan finally received a message that shed some light on the situation. A young researcher, apparently more forthright than his peers, wrote, "Mr. Mercer, I would be honored to meet with you, but we've been instructed by the Federation Council not to engage in any unauthorized discussions. I'm very sorry I can't be of more help." Nolan felt the veins popping out of his forehead as he read the message. So, this was how it was going to be. A carefully orchestrated visit, designed to keep him at arm's length from anything of real substance, and a honey trap agent to keep him busy and away from anything important. It's good, though, that they think he's that dumb. As he pondered his next move, a notification chimed on his comm badge. It was Malin, reminding him of their plans to visit the art exhibition. Despite his growing suspicions, Nolan decided to go. If she was indeed a plant, perhaps he could use this to his advantage, to glean some information about the Federation's true intentions. Meanwhile, lined up at consoles on their ship, Agent Chen and her team pored over the data they'd extracted from the Lost. Holograms of ship schematics and lines of code floated in the air around them. "This doesn't make any sense," one of the technicians muttered, frustration evident in his voice. "The propulsion systems are standard stuff, nothing we haven't seen before. But these energy readings, they don't add up." Chen leaned in, her eyes narrowing as she studied the data. Could he be using some kind of masking technology? "Possible," another agent chimed in. "But if so, it's beyond anything we've encountered. It's like the ship is just a shell, with the real tech hidden somewhere else entirely." Chen straightened up, a determined look on her face. "Can we beam aboard that thing yet?" she said, frustrated. "I have bypassed the alarms, so Mercer won't know we've made it on board, but I have no idea what's waiting for us inside," said the younger tech officer. "Should we transport in?" Chen, making a quick command decision. "Let's do it. Everybody grab your gear. Don't forget scanners and decryption pads." A few minutes later, the team was geared up and vanished from the Section 31 ship. On the Lost, Chen's crew went to work with the prowess of an experienced team, each moving to a console and trying to tap in, as two agents carried a heavy scanning device back toward the engine room. "Get as much as you can. We're out of here in 5, she announced. "I've got logs, telemetry, and a portion of comms," one tech said. As he navigated the eerily quiet streets, illuminated by the soft glow of ambient lighting, Nolan's stomach groaned. The replicated food was lacking for loss of a better word, and he was in need of something to eat. He tapped at the pad that came with his temporary ID and found some nearby restaurants that were still open. Arriving at a side street with a big glowing sign that simply said, "Late Night," several restaurants and stalls lined the wide pedestrian corridor. Nolan didn't recognize most of the foods, but he could smell meat cooking, so he followed his nose. Approaching one of the street-side stalls, he saw hanging roast duck, bullfrog legs on a rice pilaf, and kebabs with a cartoon of a sheep above them. "Any chance I can get a quick sample of the lamb?" he asked the woman behind the counter. Her thick dark hair and prominent nose gave her the look of a television gypsy, fashioned after the Romani people of his time. She glanced at his ID card, scanned it with a portable scanner, and plucked a cube of lamb from the grill. Nolan dropped the whole thing into his mouth and began chewing slowly with his cheeks bulging and his jaw working as his mouth opened and closed, struggling to contain the oversized morsel. It was juicy and flavorful, and the delicious animal fats made Nolan's eyes roll back in his head. "Real lamb," he said. A trickle of juice ran from the corner of his mouth. He dabbed his mouth with a napkin, a bit embarrassed. "This is great. I'll have one of those big kebabs, please." The woman glared at him as though she'd just witnessed a mountain lion devour Bambi, scanned his ID again, and handed him a large, heavy kebab. "No, thank you. No, fuck you. Just a cold, blank stare." As Nolan walked back to his designated hotel, the one he was allowed to stay at during his visit, he remembered visiting communist China in the 1980s and being restricted to specific hotels, usually well outfitted with bugs and cameras to keep an eye on foreigners. He tapped his comm badge. "Ilara, you there?" "Always," came the immediate reply. "How's Earth treating you?" Nolan stopped for a second. "Always" seemed stuck in his head. swallowing a big mouthful of fire-roasted onions and peppers. "It's not what I expected. Everything's so sterile, so perfect. It's like the soul of the place has been sanitized right out of it." "And the woman from the lecture?" Ilara prompted, a note of concern in her voice. Nolan paused, considering. "She's different. Engaging, present in a way others aren't. But that only means that you're not sure if you can trust her," Ilara finished. "Yeah, I wouldn't have trusted a woman randomly deciding to be my BFF when I was alive," he said with a hint of sadness. "Stay frosty." Ilara stealing one of Nolan's typical phrases. Nolan arrived at his quarters, a sleek apartment with a view of the bay. "Ilara, any news on your end?" Ilara's tone shifted, becoming more businesslike. "Actually, yes. Someone's been trying to access the Lost. A team is working to bypass security and beam aboard." "To be expected." Nolan pulled the final cube of meat from the long skewer, biting it in half. "Section 31. Most likely," Ilara confirmed. "They've conducted scans and accessed multiple consoles remotely. But don't worry. They haven't gotten anything of real value. I fed them just enough to keep them busy without revealing anything crucial." Nolan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Thank you. Keep an eye on it. I'm sure they won't stop until they get what they want." The next morning, Nolan decided to try and make contact with some of the scientists and academics he'd hoped to meet with on his trip. He used his temporary credentials to access a public communication terminal, sending out messages to various institutions and individuals. Hours passed, and the responses, when they came, were uniformly polite and evasive. "I'm sorry, but my schedule is full. Perhaps another time. I'm not at liberty to discuss my work with outside parties." Frustration mounting, Nolan finally received a message that shed some light on the situation. A young researcher, apparently more forthright than his peers, wrote, "Mr. Mercer, I would be honored to meet with you, but we've been instructed by the Federation Council not to engage in any unauthorized discussions. I'm very sorry I can't be of more help." Nolan felt the veins popping out of his forehead as he read the message. So, this was how it was going to be. A carefully orchestrated visit, designed to keep him at arm's length from anything of real substance, and a honey trap agent to keep him busy and away from anything important. It's good, though, that they think he's that dumb. As he pondered his next move, a notification chimed on his comm badge. It was Melan, reminding him of their plans to visit the art exhibition. Despite his growing suspicions, Nolan decided to go. If she was indeed a plant, perhaps he could use this to his advantage, to glean some information about the Federation's true intentions. Meanwhile, lined up at consoles on their ship, Agent Chen and her team pored over the data they'd extracted from the Lost. Holograms of ship schematics and lines of code floated in the air around them. "This doesn't make any sense," one of the technicians muttered, frustration evident in his voice. "The propulsion systems are standard stuff, nothing we haven't seen before. But these energy readings, they don't add up." Chen leaned in, her eyes narrowing as she studied the data. Could he be using some kind of masking technology? "Possible," another agent chimed in. "But if so, it's beyond anything we've encountered. It's like the ship is just a shell, with a real tech hidden somewhere else entirely." Chen straightened up, a determined look on her face. "Can we beam aboard that thing yet?" she said, frustrated. "I have bypassed the alarms, so Mercer won't know we've made it on board, but I have no idea what's waiting for us inside," said the younger tech officer. "Should we transport in?" Chen, making a quick command decision. "Let's do it. Everybody grab your gear. Don't forget scanners and decryption pads." A few minutes later, the team was geared up and vanished from the Section 31 ship. On the Lost, Chen's crew went to work with the prowess of an experienced team, each moving to a console and trying to tap in as two agents carried a heavy scanning device back toward the engine room. "Get as much as you can. We're out of here in 5, she announced. "I've got logs, telemetry, and a portion of comms," one tech said. The two agents in the engine compartment continued their scans. "We're going to need a few more minutes, Commander Chen." One of them looked up. "We've almost got the whole propulsion system." "Finish it up, everybody. We're heading out." Back on their own ship, the agents set about decrypting and making sense of all the data they'd acquired. "We have his propulsion systems," one of the techs spoke up. "Thrusters, impulse, warp. I don't see anything at all unusual. Some of this tech looks ancient. Keep working on it. I'll continue surveillance on Mercer. If we can't get the answers from his ship, we'll have to get them from the man himself." As the day wore on, the twin storylines of Nolan's Earth visit and Section 31's investigation continued to unfold, each moving inexorably towards a collision course that would have far-reaching consequences for all involved. Nolan met Mylan outside the art exhibition as planned. She greeted him with a warm smile, but he noticed a flicker of something. Anticipation. Anxiety in her eyes. "Ready to dive into some 22nd century art?" she asked, gesturing towards the entrance. Nolan hesitated, then made a decision. "Actually, I was thinking we could do something a little different. How about we get out of the city for a bit?" Mylan blinked, caught off guard. "Oh, what did you have in mind?" "I heard there's an old nature preserve up the coast. Muir Woods, I think it was called. Still around?" "Yes, it is," Mylan replied, her composure quickly returning. "But it's a restricted area now. Ecological concerns and all that." Nolan grinned, her reference to nows as she knew he had a thin. It wasn't her first slip-up. "I'm sure we can figure something out. What do you say? Fancy a little adventure?" After a moment's hesitation, Mylan nodded. "All right, I guess. Let's do it." They made their way to a transport hub, where Nolan used his temporary credentials to requisition a small shuttle. As they soared over the Bay Area, the landscape below was a patchwork of gleaming cities and carefully managed green spaces. "It's so organized," Nolan mused, a note of melancholy in his voice. Mylan studied him curiously. "You sound almost disappointed. Isn't this what humanity has been working towards? A world in harmony?" Nolan shrugged. "Harmony requires nature's chaos. Some things aren't supposed to be controlled." They landed on the outskirts of what used to be Muir Woods. The ancient redwoods still stood, but they were surrounded by force fields and monitoring stations. A small path led into the trees, dotted with holographic signs warning of restricted access. Ignoring the warnings, Nolan led the way into the forest. Mylan followed, her earlier confidence seeming to waver even more, perhaps realizing that being alone with the primitive could have fatal consequences. As they walked deeper into the woods, the sounds of civilization faded away. For the first time since arriving on Earth, Nolan felt a sense of connection to the planet he once called home. "It's beautiful," Mylan whispered, her hand brushing against the bark of a massive redwood. Nolan nodded, drinking in the sight. "This is what I've been missing. Something real, something imperfect." They came to a small clearing, dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy above. Nolan turned to Mylan, his expression serious. "All right, Mylan, time for some honesty. Who are you, really? And don't tell me you're just a xenobiologist who happened to strike up a conversation with a stranger." Malin's face fell, the facade crumbling. I work for Starfleet Intelligence," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "They asked me to keep an eye on you, to make sure you didn't access any restricted areas or technologies." Nolan laughed, looking around, but there was no humor in it. "I should have known. Was any of it real? Our conversations? The connection?" Mylan stepped closer, her eyes pleading. "No, not at first, but yes, some of it was real, more than I expected." She considered reaching for the hypospray she had concealed in her tunic. Nolan's ready stance convinced her not to. It would have been the last thing she ever did. As they stood there, the weight of truth hanging between them, a distant whine of engines broke the silence. Someone had noticed their unauthorized excursion. "We should go," Mylan said urgently. Nolan nodded. As they hurried back toward their shuttle, he couldn't help but feel that this moment, this brief taste of wildness and honesty, was the most real thing he'd experienced since returning to Earth. Except maybe the lamb. Meanwhile, back in San Francisco, Agent Chen received an urgent communication. "Ma'am, we've detected unusual energy readings from the Lost. It's like the ship is talking to something." Chen's eyes narrowed. Talking to what? The technician shook his head. "We're not sure. But whatever it is, it's not in our solar system." As Nolan and Malin raced back to the city and Section 31 grappled with the mysteries of the Lost, the stage was set for a confrontation that would challenge the very foundations of Nolan's relationship with Earth and the Federation. Nolan and Malin barely made it back to San Francisco before Starfleet security caught up with them. As they touched down at the transport hub, a stern-faced officer approached, flanked by two others. "Mr. Mercer," the lead officer said, his voice clipped, "we need to have a word about your unauthorized excursion." Nolan straightened, meeting the officer's gaze. "I wasn't aware I needed authorization to visit a forest on my own planet." The officer's expression tightened. "Earth has changed, Mr. Mercer. There are protocols in place for a reason." As they were escorted to a nearby security office, Nolan caught Malin's eye. She looked torn, conflict evident on her face. Inside, Nolan was subjected to a series of pointed questions about his activities and intentions. He answered truthfully but vaguely, his patience wearing thin with each passing moment. "Look," he finally said, leaning forward, "I came here hoping to reconnect, to find some trace of the world I left behind. Instead, I've found a society that seems to have traded its soul for security and sterility. Is this really what humanity has become?" The security officer shifted uncomfortably, clearly unaccustomed to such direct challenges. "Mr. Mercer, you have to understand." "No," Nolan interrupted, standing up. "I don't have to understand anything. I think I've seen enough. I'd like to return to my hotel now." After a tense moment, the officer nodded. "Very well. But please understand, any further violations will result in the immediate termination of your visit." As Nolan left the security office, he found Malin waiting outside. Her eyes were redrimmed, as if she'd been crying. "Nolan, she began, but he held up a hand to stop her. "Save it," he said, his voice low. "Whatever this was between us, whatever it could have been, it doesn't matter now." He turned and walked away, leaving Malin standing alone in the sterile corridor. Meanwhile, aboard the Havoc, Ilara continued her silent vigil of the Lost. She had detected Section 31's incursion into the ship and watched the whole thing on her view screen. They continued their attempts to monitor the ship's communications, and she continued feeding them a steady stream of innocuous data. But now she sensed a change in their tactics. As Nolan walked back to his assigned quarters, the streets of San Francisco eerily quiet in the late evening, he felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Years of survival instincts kicked in, and he subtly increased his pace, eyes scanning his surroundings. He'd barely turned a corner when 4 figures materialized from the shadows, their movements practiced and coordinated. A 5th stepped out in front of him, blocking his path. "Mr. Mercer," the lead agent said, his voice cold, "we need you to come with us for questioning." Nolan's eyes narrowed, his body tensing, a slight smile. Maybe, maybe not. In a flash, the agents moved to subdue him, but they had severely underestimated their quarry. Nolan's meaty fist plugged into the lead agent's nose with a sickening crunch, sending him sprawling with blood spattering all around him. Nolan spun, using his elbow to catch another agent in the solar plexus, and quickly snapping his fist up, connecting with his attacker's face, and cocking his elbow, uppercutting the man's chin. With the air forced from his lungs, his head snapped back and he fell unconscious. That satisfying hollow sound when his head hit the concrete. The remaining 3 rushed him at once. Nolan's movements were a blur of primitive fury, each strike precise and devastating. He fought with the pent-up frustration of his entire visit. Every disappointment, every betrayal, every disillusionment fueling his fists. One agent went down with a monkey punch to the throat, another with a vicious headbutt that left blood spaltered from a broken nose. The last standing agent managed to land a glancing blow, but Nolan barely felt it. He grabbed the man's arm, twisting it with a savage yank that ended in a stomach-churning pop. A sharp push, slamming the agent's face into the ground, left the final assailant inoperable. In less than a minute, all 5 agents lay bleeding unconscious, possibly dead. Nolan stood among them, chest heaving, knuckles bloodied. He felt more alive than he had since setting foot on Earth. Without a word, he continued on his way, leaving the battered agents behind. He knew the clandestine nature of Section 31 would prevent any official report of the incident. "I hate spooks," he grumbled. Back in his quarters, Nolan washed the blood from his hands. He looked up in the mirror. His attacker's dried blood was crusted across his face. Nolan was not proud of the fact that the one thing he was best at was the one thing humanity could never accept, even when he was alive. He pulled off the remaining scraps of his shirt and turned on the shower. The next morning, Nolan found himself in New Orleans, drawn by memories of stories he'd heard about Cisco's father's restaurant. The French Quarter was a curious mix of preserved history and modern amenities, holographic signs advertising authentic Creole cuisine alongside centuries-old buildings. He pushed open the door to Cisco's, the aroma of spices and seafood enveloping him. An older man looked up from behind the counter, his dark eyes curious. "Welcome to Cisco's," he said, his voice warm. "Sit wherever you like. What can I get for you?" Nolan settled onto a stool at the counter. "Whatever's good," he replied. "I heard this place has quite a history." The man nodded, a hint of pride in his smile. "That it does. I'm Gabriel, by the way. Took over from Joseph Cisco himself." As Gabriel prepared a steaming bowl of gumbo, Nolan found himself opening up. He spoke of his disappointment with what Earth had become, careful not to reveal too much about his true identity. Gabriel listened, nodding thoughtfully. "Change isn't always easy to accept," he said, placing the bowl in front of Nolan. "But there's still heart here if you know where to look. It's in the food, in the music, in the people who still interact and enjoy each other's company." Motioning to the groups of people at the tables, Nolan took a bite of the gumbo, flavors exploding on his tongue. For a moment, he felt a connection to Earth he'd been missing since his arrival. "Could you use some aged Black Angus steaks?" Nolan asked Gabriel. Black Angus hasn't been available since my dad was a kid. The steaks he have now are small, flavorless. Might as well eat replicated beef product number 3s. As the day wore on, Nolan made his way to the transport station. It was time for his final stop, the Oklahoma Reserve. Using his 24-hour pass, he beamed to the familiar landscape of his old hunting grounds. The sun was setting as he hiked up the small mountain, the terrain both familiar and alien. Modern conservation efforts had changed the ecosystem, but the essence of the place remained. The humidity certainly hadn't changed. He set up camp near the spot where his old cabin had stood, now long gone. As night fell, he lay back, gazing up at the stars. The constellations were the same, but his perspective had changed irrevocably. As night fell over the Oklahoma wilderness, Nolan's sleep was far from peaceful. His dreams were a chaotic blend of past and present, memories of his old life intertwining with the sterile world he'd encountered on his return. In his fitful slumber, he saw himself walking deeper and deeper into the woods, the trees growing denser, the path behind him disappearing. There was a sense of finality to it, as if each step were taking him further from the person he once was. Finally, an old man wandered away from him. He watched him disappear into the undergrowth and the woods. He awoke with the first light of dawn, his body stiff from sleeping on the hard ground. As he watched the sun rise over the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Nolan felt a profound sense of closure washing over him. "Nolan Johnny Mercer died here," he murmured to himself, his voice barely above a whisper. He wandered off into those woods when his mind finally gave out and was never seen again. That bittersweet epiphany washed over Nolan, a mixture of sorrow and release. In the centuries since his departure, both he and Earth had undergone profound transformations, evolving along divergent paths. The chasm between them now seemed as vast and insurmountable as the space he'd traversed in his journey across the stars. His birthplace, once so intimately familiar, now felt as foreign and inscrutable as any other alien world he'd encountered. This realization, while tinged with loss, also offered a strange comfort, a final severance of the ties that had kept him tethered to a past that had not existed for centuries. As he packed up his makeshift camp, Nolan felt an urgency building within him. He couldn't wait to get back to morning, back to the world and the life he'd built for himself. But more than that, there was something else, something he'd been avoiding for far too long. His thoughts turned to Alara, to the bond they'd forged over centuries. It was time, he realized, to stop running from his feelings. Hours later, Nolan found himself back on morning, sitting across from Alara in a cozy diner. The familiar sights and sounds of his adopted home washed over him, a soothing balm after the alienation he'd felt on Earth. "Here you are, Mr. Mercer," the smiling waitress said as she arrived. "Alara," she elongated as she set a plate in front of her. "Drinks and condiments to follow. I'm Nana. Just holler if you need anything else, okay?" "I didn't order bacon," Nolan piped up. "Yeah, but you wanted bacon, right?" She chuckled and walked away with a big smile. Something about that Nolan really loved. Alara, in her physical form, looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and concern as they dug into a hearty breakfast. "So," she said, breaking the comfortable silence, "how was your trip down memory lane?" Nolan took a long sip of real, non-replicated coffee before answering. "Enlightening," he said finally, "but not in the way I expected." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "Earth isn't home anymore, Alara. My home is here." He looked up at her, deep into her eyes, expecting more words to come out of his mouth, though they failed to appear. Alara nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "I'm glad you found your place, Nolan. But something tells me that's not all that's on your mind." Nolan chuckled, shaking his head. "You know me." He took a deep breath, steeling himself. "Alara, Wait," she interrupted, her expression suddenly serious. "Before you say anything else, there's something you need to know." She took a drink, her eyes never leaving his. "Remember how Section 31 tried to access the Lost?" Nolan nodded, momentarily thrown by the change of subject. "Well," Alara continued, "they think they've cracked it. They scanned every system, took all logs and telemetry, and even used some new kind of deep scan tech on the propulsion systems." Nolan leaned back in the booth, the faint smile playing on his lips. "They believe they've uncovered the blink drive, don't they?" Alara's eyes sparkled with amusement. "Exactly. But the joke's on them. The Lost, just like the others, is a decoy. The real blink drive, the one they're so desperate to understand, has always been with us, on the Havoc." Nolan chuckled, the tension in his shoulders easing. "And they have no idea that every blink, every fold in space-time is executed through you, Alara, and the Havoc. They're chasing ghosts." Alara nodded, the satisfied smile on her face. "They're about to realize how little they truly understand. They think they've got us, but they don't even know what they're looking at." Nolan's grin widened as he reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "Alara, you're not just an AI running the show, you're the only one who can. And I've been avoiding this for too long. You're more than just my friend. You're—" But before he could finish, Alara's eyes widened in alarm. "Nolan," she interrupted yet again, her voice urgent, "they're activating right now." Meanwhile, light years away, a Section 31 ship hung in space, its crew confident in their newly acquired technology. Commander Chen on the bridge, hands on her hips, a confident gleam in her eye, gave the order they'd all been waiting for. "Initiate blink drive," he said, a triumphant smile on her face. There was a blinding flash, and ship vanished. Back on morning, Nolan and Alara exchanged a knowing look. The secret of the blink drive was safe. and those who sought to steal it will have learned a brutal lesson. As Alara and Nolan left the diner, walking side by side into the bright morning sun, Nolan took her hand. "I found my home," he croaked out, holding back tears and hoping beyond hope that she understood his meaning. He could muster no more words. Always. Nolan knew he was exactly where he belonged. The primitive passenger had finally found his way home. Gabriel and Cisco's, flipping the overturned chairs, formed the tabletops to the floor and wiping off tables. He unlocks the front door and flips his hanging sign from "Sorry, we're closed" to "Open. Please come in." The door opens almost immediately. "Are you Gabriel at Cisco's?" a man asked, sticking his head in the door. "I sure am. Please sit anywhere. I have breakfast already started." Gesturing inside the restaurant, "I'll need you to sign here, please." The man leaned forward with a pad. "We can bring everything in for you." "Wait, everything what?" Confusion crossed Gabriel's face as several men poured in carrying big boxes. "Do you have a walk-in refrigeration container, sir?" one of the men asked, setting one of the boxes on a table with a heavy, solid thump. "Product of morning," the box said, "aged Black Angus." After hauling several boxes, one of the men said, "These are dry goods," and dropped the box on the restaurant's counter. "Product of Horizon and Horizon Coffee Plantation." Epilogue. As realization dawned on their faces, the ship began to drift, slowly rotating in an endless void. The Section 31 crew's triumph slowly turned to horror as they realized they had not blinked to their plotted destination, but to some unknown hell. Blank faces stared out the viewport. "Where are we?" Chen demanded. "Get our bearings." She leaned forward and strained her eyes as hard as she could out the viewport, blinking repeatedly at the nothingness. "Bearings from what?" replied the agent at the nav console. "Long-range sensors are picking up." "Nothing." "Well, no comm traffic. Nothing at all. Just this horrible background noise," said the agent at the comm station, tapping the sound to the ship's systems. Long, ghostly wails blended into one another endlessly. She cut it off. "I don't have a single star on my astrometric system. It's extending in all directions, and I don't even have gravitational shear." He looked up at Chen. She glared back at him. "No anomalies or readings of any kind." He shook his head. "We have to be a long way from anything not to experience even a little gravitational or magnetic wave motion." "Is this subspace?" someone asked. Suddenly it hit her. She began tapping away at the console, then stood straight, eyes glazed, the Nekrit expanse. "Looking around, he sent us to the Nekrit expanse," she cried out, losing her military bearing. "Prepare the blink drive for another jump," she shouted. "Get us back to Earth." The agent at the nav console tapped away. "I've entered Earth's coordinates, but without a reference point, I'm not actually sure where we'll end up." He looked up with concern. "Engage," she screamed in a panic, but nothing happened. "Engage." Her eyes bulging. "Engage."